Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. And it's a very exciting day today because for the first time ever, we are being joined by Leon and Shaz from Hong Kong and beyond. And the first time that I've ever spoken to you face to face after, as we were saying earlier before we started recording, how long have we been talking, but never spoken face to face? Like years at this point, I think, right?
It is. It's a good couple of years, and I'm glad the day's finally here. We've been looking forward to this.
I am really excited. So, I mean, first of all, thank you for joining me and thanks for making the time. Here
Oh,
today to talk about
For having us.
election. I have the very fancy new one from Chameleon Films, which I'm getting lots of glare on. I don't know if you can even see it without the glare, but
very envious.
you guys don't have this one yet.
No, we're stuck with the old panorama DVDs.
But those have slipcases, though, don't they?
Yeah, they're all right,
Yeah,
but
nice.
we would like to upgrade to those at some
This is
point.
there's the inside. But yeah, I just watched the second one last night, but we're here today to talk about the first one. So we're going to do two videos. In this one, we're going to talk about the first one, and then there will be a second video where we talk about the second one. So I just wanted the election films are like very important to me personally, not just because I love them, but because they are very important in my like journey through Hong Kong cinema, basically. But I'm curious for the both of you when you first saw the first one, if you remember it, and if you have any thoughts on the first time you saw it.
I do. For me, it was kind of strange because I went to Hong Kong in 2006 for a holiday.
Okay.
And I was walking past all the cinemas, and the first Hong Kong film I saw on was Election 2. I thought, wow, I've got to go and see that. Simon Yam's in it. So I went in to see it, and I so liked it. I thought, I've got to see the first one. I thought, and I can't wait till I go back home. So as mad as I am, I went out and bought a portable DVD player, went and bought Election 1, and then watched Election 1 in the hotel room.
That's amazing. Was it the same day? Did you watch them both in the same day?
Yes. Yeah, I know. I was that eager.
Dedication.
Yeah. And then I think it was like one of the first tryout films I ever put on for you, Shaz. Is that right?
Yes, I think it was. Yeah.
Yes. Introduced her with a bit of harshness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never quite the same afterwards.
My wife actually like my wife does not like a lot of Hong Kong movies. So I usually watch stuff alone, but she really likes Johnny To for whatever reason. So that's like one of the few things I can get her to watch with me when I'm watching Hong Kong movies.
Well, it's easy for me if it's Johnny To because Shaz loves him as much.
Yeah.
But also, if you got a certain Louis Koo in the picture, then
Easy sell.
Very handsome fellow. Who's behind us? There's a cat behind you guys.
Oh, Darla.
you can see it. Yeah, Darla. She's she better behave. Yeah.
Do they ever do they cause problems? Do you have more than one cat or just the one?
Just the one now. We used to have a mum, didn't we? But we lost her a couple of years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She was a lovely cat too. But yeah, Gwen was a mum. But yeah.
I get interrupted a lot by the dogs barking, which is they're a lot noisier than cats. I rewatching Election, I just was astounded by how well put together it is. It's just like masterpiece film. Like every single scene, especially speaking from my perspective as like a writer, looking at what they're doing with the characters and stuff like that. I just can't get over how good it is. And like I've seen it, I think like 7 times. And it never gets old to me and it never gets boring to me. And it's so good. I don't know. I mean, how many, do you know how many times you've seen it? Is this like one that you rewatch a lot?
For me, it's one of the few Johnny To films that I will rewatch regularly. I just think it's a little cut above for me. There's something with the whole atmosphere of the film, even down to that soundtrack. That's really
it's so good. Yeah.
Sends chills down me every time. And I don't know, I feel like we get a little extra from the actors, like an extra fine performance. It's like they're aware of what they're in and they know it's something special. And I really get that vibe. It's like, oh, every time I put it on, I'll never cease to amaze at how much it grips me, even though I've seen it like many times. I just I think it's like effortless performances all round, and it's such a good cast. Yeah.
Great cast.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting because in a way, I think Simon Yam is kind of playing against maybe not against type, but he has these famous performances where he's like really over the top, and he's so quiet in this movie, but
Yeah.
he's so good. Like, I think this might be my favorite performance of his because of how much he conveys through doing so little.
Yes, it's very understated, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's what I like about it myself, is that, like you said, Simon usually goes large, but in this one, Tony Loncarfe goes large.
Yeah.
And then Simon's got the, it's all internal, isn't it? And you're guessing all the way through the film, thinking what's to come, what's inside him, how dark is he? You just don't really know until you get there, do you?
Yeah, and that's such a great way to put it, is what you guess. You're guessing the whole movie because you don't really know who he is. And he's got this kid. So you're like, oh, maybe he's like the family man, and like he's the upstanding citizen, and he's like, the honorable criminal or whatever. And well, I don't want to spoil what happens, but yeah.
There's a few twists and turns in there.
Yeah. And it also has, I mean, not to geek out about the writing stuff, but it has a very clear act structure of like the first act is the election. The second act is we have to get the baton. And then the third act is who wins the election and what happens after that with the relationships between everyone. It's so well delineated. I think Johnnie To, from what I've heard, is like one of the few Hong Kong filmmakers who they write out like an actual screenplay before they make the movie. Because with a lot of these movies, it's just, from what I've been told, it's just like a piece of paper and they write down the plot points on it. Like there's no dialogue written, like there's nothing. And then they just go out and shoot it. And you can tell that there's extra care, I think, put into like the conceptualization of his movies with where everything is placed. It's like clockwork. It's so good.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think when you've got that structure, like you said, every good story's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when you have that as your foundation for a film, and all the ingredients are there, and you've got somebody as masterful as Johnnie To with such a talented cast and such a good story, like you said, the writing in this one's particularly good. And it's just like breathtaking. It's how many times can you replicate something like that? I think, we get plenty of good films, and you, like I will, you love all aspects of Hong Kong cinema, which is why we loved watching your channel and still do, because you cover, all bases. And I think that's one thing that we have in common, is that we appreciate more than just the action. We like all the aspects, the drama, the music, the storytelling, and just love to dissect it, and look at all the individual elements, because there's so much to appreciate that you could, let go and not pay attention to, especially today's society where everybody's on a mobile phone and, oh, it's a quiet bit,
Yeah,
and
they just see him. Yeah. But the quiet bits, I think, are oftentimes with Johnnie To's movies the most important parts, right? But you just made me think that you're mentioning the acting. Nick Chung in this movie is so, because he's so demented, that character. The way he in the first scene, you see him, he's eating a porcelain spoon, and you're like, this guy is insane. But then, later in the film, not to spoil, I mean, tiny spoiler, I guess, but there's that scene where he gets in that like machete fight with those guys, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he's getting hit over and over again. But because they've established in the first scene that he's in that he can eat a freaking porcelain spoon, you're not surprised that he could take a bunch of machetes, right? Like, but it's just, his intensity is so good.
Yeah, it's a good setup, that, isn't it? Because Nick Chung, he's really convincing as a badass, and I think in this film, I mean, you said, because other films you've seen in, you've seen in more like comedic roles and stuff, so you was like, was that really Nick Chung? When
wasn't it?
You didn't realize when you watched it years ago that it was Nick Chung. You're like, completely
surprised. It's a bit of a shock. Like you say, dedication to a role.
Right, I know, right? Yeah, that's actually, I think this was the first movie I saw. I should say how I first saw this movie, since I asked you guys how you first saw it. When I lived in Massachusetts, we had a local video store that I would go to, and I really remember very like viscerally the first time I saw this movie, because I don't know, are you guys fans of Sonic Youth?
I don't know what Sonic Youth is, do you?
No. It's like Yeah, they're like an indie rock band from New York City they were big in like the 80s and 90s, and they were kind of like a precursor to like Nirvana and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So they're really big in the US, and the bass player and the guitar player used to be married to each other, and they
Wow.
lived in the same town I lived in. And so when I was in the video store, the day I rented Election, they were in the next aisle, like arguing with each other. So I remember really well, like standing there listening to them argue. Of these like people who I had like looked up to since I was a little kid. But yes, my local video store got this movie, the second movie, and Exiled all at the same time. They like came out on DVD in the US around the same time. And at that time, I wasn't watching a lot of Hong Kong movies. And I saw them on the shelf and I was like, that looks kind of cool. I honestly, I didn't even know who Johnny Toe was. Like I hadn't seen any of his earlier stuff because a lot of those movies, like The Mission and stuff, I don't think they got as big a release in the US as they did in other parts of the world where there's like more of a fan community. I don't know, but I had never even heard of those movies.
Yeah, to be honest, the mission, I don't think I'd have found it if it wasn't for Podcast on Fire. Because I'd never been able to get my hands on a copy. It wasn't really put out in the UK. I've read about it, heard about it, then I heard it on the podcast, and I was like, how the hell do I watch this film? So I found it on YouTube, and that's the only way I've seen The Mission.
Yeah. I found someone sent me a copy of The Mission that's got some kind of subtitles burned into it that are like maybe like Czech or Hungarian or like I don't know. I don't recognize the writing. Maybe it's Turkish. I don't know. It has like accents in odd places and like curly cues on the letters. But that's the version that I have. So yeah, so I just rented these movies not knowing anything about them, and I watched this one first, and then Election 2, and then Exiled, and I was just like, oh man, this is amazing. And then I went back and watched the John Woo movies, and that kind of started like another wave of me like falling in love with Hong Kong cinema. So it was really cool to be able to have that experience.
That is a good way to kick off for sure. And what a triple pounder.
And and his style is so unique that I like. At first, I was kind of caught off guard because the movies move quickly, like the pacing is good, but there's like this creepy slowness to it. Like the camera movements are very kind of deliberately slow, and it's got this kind of sedated ambiance while all this violent and crazy stuff is happening. And I had never seen a movie like that before, so I didn't even know what to make of it. Honestly, I just knew that it was awesome.
Yeah, I like how different it is in retrospect to other Hong Kong directors. If you get like a shootout in Johnnie Tell film, it can be very stationary, you know. Whereas in a lot of other films, everybody's running, diving, jumping, sliding across the floor. But in this, they'll just be looking at each other. It's almost like a spaghetti western standoff, and they're just the time being very deliberate, and it's got a completely different feel. And I think I like that. It's very stylistic, and of course, you did Exile quite early on, and there's a lot of style with gunplay in that. And yeah, it's just it's nice to see more than one way to do it. You know, there's the John Woo way, we all love that. There's the Ringo Lam, and I think Johnny Tell's got his own method too. And we only just saw Breaking News recently, didn't we?
Yeah. Oh man, that opening scene.
Wow.
Yeah.
I couldn't take it in. I was like, what the hell is going on here?
It's
like,
insane. Did you do you have the Chameleon Films release of that one, or did you watch there's like something on one of the bonus features on that disc? Someone, I think it's maybe Johnny Toe, talks about how they hired the cinematographer for Lord of the Rings to come to Hong Kong to help them with that shot. And he was like, well, I can't do this. This is way too complicated. So they had to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, that was a crazy shot, that wasn't it? I mean,
it's insane.
How do you follow all that?
Yeah.
I can't imagine the physics of it. I mean,
no, and I mean, the camera's obviously on a crane, right? Because it starts on like a second floor and then it comes down, but it's got to be on wheels too, because it's moving up and down the street. And you're like, what, like just even thinking about what rig are they using to try to shoot this? And then the logistics of like the trash cans and the people, that's just, it's insane for me to think about.
Didn't they say it took them 3 takes to get it or something?
Yeah, and I think they only had time for 3. Like
Yeah.
they were getting shut down, and they were like, okay, this is the last one. And so, and the fact that they only did it because have you guys have seen Children of Men, the Alfonso Cuarón? Have you seen that movie with
Is that
Clive
the
Owen?
Clive Owen one?
Yeah.
Not for a long, long time, so I can't really remember much. Very sketchy on it.
So that's got a single shot in it that's like 10 or 12 minutes long.
Mhm.
That's got like battles in it. Like there's like this riot going on and they're moving through the riot and there's like army tanks coming through it. Like it's one of the most insane shots I've ever seen. But they had like 8 or 9 days to do that.
Wow.
So when I think with this to do one shot, yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
So when I think about this movie and they had like 2 days or something like that, and it's like an 8-minute shot, it's just like blows my mind that they were able to get it done. Yeah.
That's pressure, and that is complete pressure.
Yeah. And then what if you don't get it? What do? You have to like figure out a way to reshoot the opening, I guess. Yeah.
They'd have to cut it out, wouldn't they? I know they've had big fails in films before. I think not that it's a classic or nothing, but the Dolph Lundgren film Masters of the Universe, they had like, a really, really big effect for the beginning of the film. I think it cost them like something like, it was either 2 million or 200,000. I can't remember, but they couldn't afford to do it twice because they had a very tight budget, and it went wrong. So they couldn't do it, and they couldn't have the big opening. And I guess we'll never know what that was.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And now it just because my kids are big Masters of the Universe fans, so I watched that movie recently. Yeah, and it just kind of opens with like Dolph Lundgren running around in the desert, like
Oiled up.
Yes. Oh man, that's funny. God, what was I was gonna say something else about Johnny To. Oh, you mentioned Exiled. Not to get totally off track here, but the shootout in the restaurant in that where they're just like sitting down, but the tension, and there's a similar scene. Well, we can talk about this when we talk about Election 2. Never mind, I won't get carried away. But he's just so good at creating tension in ways that are not loud. So it's not like people screaming at each other or anything like that. It's like he sets up the characters, you know who are enemies, you know who are friends, and then you know all their secrets. And then they end up in a place and you're like, oh shit, because you know what's coming, and it just creates so much anticipation. And I just love that.
Yeah, it's nice to have a build in it to, make you anticipate what's coming. I think that's the best form of storytelling is when, they feed you along with a sort of bait in it, dangling that carrot, and you're like, yeah, I just love that.
It's almost like oh, go ahead.
No, that's good. Go on.
It kind of reminds, I know this is like outlandish to say, but it kind of reminds me of Shakespeare in like when you think of Romeo and Juliet, right? And she takes the thing so it looks like she's dead. And we know she's not really dead, but then we know that he doesn't know. And it's just like, oh my God, this is horrible. This is horrible. And it to me, like Johnny To does similar, and I guess we should credit his screenwriters, but they do similar stuff to that. Where like, you know everything that's going on. The characters don't know. So there's so much intensity for me to be like, oh, you got to figure it out. You got to figure it out. It's like so good.
I think they're probably big fans of Shakespeare over in Hong Kong, because you think about the amount of times it pops up in a film. You got Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars, where they're doing a bit of Shakespeare at the end of that, and I think that might be Romeo and Juliet. There's that Leslie Chung film, isn't there, the Shaw Brother one, Teenage Dreamers, and in that they're doing Shakespeare as well. Yeah. It's like, it just seems to pop up so many times. So I guess maybe they get taught it in the schools over there. I don't know, but I
mean, it would make sense if you think about like the colonial system, right? I mean, the schools, I don't know that much about how the colonial system works, but was the schools would have been run by the British government? Is that correct?
I would think. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe they did learn Shakespeare.
You tell me. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but we could always ask Paul Fox. He would be able to clarify that for us, because I believe he did some teaching out in Hong Kong. So Paul Fox from Podcast and Fire would be able to tell us.
Oh yeah, or maybe people in the comments, if we post this video, let us know. Yeah, what the education system was. It's just interesting to think about. Something else that I thought about. I'm like, my mind is going all over the place, but I'm just excited about this movie. We were talking about Nick Chung, right? And there's the scene. This is just another thing that I think Johnny To is so good at including details in movies that are visually interesting but provide practical purpose in the film. So like there's that scene where Nick Chung throws the paint across the car window of Louis Koo's car, right? And it blankets his windshield so he can't see where he's going, right? So there's a practical purpose to it. Then he throws Louis Koo gets the paint can and throws it back onto the Nick Chung character, so he's got paint on him, right? You're like, okay, whatever. They're throwing paint at each other. Then you get into this scene where there's a bunch of cars and there's a bunch of guys wearing all black with knives. And you're like, okay, we know who Nick Chung is because he's got paint on him. And we know which car is Louis Koo's car because it's got paint on it. So it gives you like a visual signifier within the scene of what you're supposed to be looking at, while also being like a logical part of the story development.
Oh, that didn't even cross my mind.
No,
I
I didn't even clock that.
I just like the way it looked.
Yeah.
It looks so cool, right? Yeah.
It looks cool. And the camera work in that particular scene, because you see him, don't you? And you see them coming from all edges
so
of the
good,
screen.
yeah.
I just love that. It's like, oh, I could frame that and stick that on the wall. It's just super cool.
It almost makes me think of like a Western or a movie like Yojimbo, like the Japanese movie, where the Toshiro Mifune is walking into town and all the bad guys are on the sides of the streets looking at him, just like Nick Chung is walking down that street and everyone's there looking, or he's on the motorcycle or whatever. Yeah.
That's the comparison. I like that.
And it just got that slow build that's so good, which is I think very Japanese. Like, Japanese movies use a lot of like very slow, silent scenes to build tension. So
yes, that's one area where we're starting to expand our wings a bit in it. The Japanese cinema, we have a lot to learn on that. But also, whilst we're on the election thing, one of your favourites turns up in election, always in Johnnie To films, and you liked him in this, didn't you? You know what I mean?
Give me a clue. You mean Lam Suet?
Yeah.
Yes.
Lam
awesome.
Suet. Johnnie To film is going to be Lam Suet in there somewhere.
I love him.
I do. I quite like his performance in this one too. There's that scene, isn't there? There's a scene when, is it Gordon Lamb catches up with him? It's been a couple of weeks.
That scene is amazing. Yeah.
And he's just chanting the Brotherhood sort of code, isn't he?
Yeah.
As he's taking a beating, like, and I don't know, I just really like that scene. I think it's like shows a lot of character, and then the payoff is that they're both on the same side.
And they when both of their phones ring at the same time, it's so good. Like, I love that scene. To me, like that scene, and then the scene it goes into, because the next, that scene is, Gordon Lamb gets the baton, drives to Hong Kong, and then Louis Koo gets it, and then the scene we were just talking about with Nick Chung happens. So those sequences are like back to back, and it's so good. Yeah.
Lamb Suet's fantastic, aren't they?
Yeah, and Lamb Suet, I think Mike Leader said at some point that he runs like a prop company, like provides props for movies. And that he did that before he was an actor. And then Johnnie To started casting him and stuff, but he still does that. So he still like rents props out to people.
Hey.
That's incredible. Yeah.
It was a cool little behind the scenes thing. Yeah, because I did remember hearing at some point that he was not like originally a professional actor and he was friends with Johnnie To, but I didn't know the whole story, where Johnnie To was just like, you have such an interesting face, I'm going to start putting you in movies. And then they started giving him dialogue and they're like, wait, this guy's actually a really good actor. We should start putting him in everything. Yeah.
He is good, isn't he? But he missed a trick there, didn't he? Because if he had access to all those props, I'm sure, then when he lost his gun in PTU, he should have gone and got himself.
Just got another one. Problem solved. We should write to Johnnie To. We're like, here's a huge plot hole in your movie. You have a prop master who has access to all these guns. Why didn't he just get another one?
Yeah, he's so good though, isn't he? I mean, I like that he can do serious and he can do dramatic. And I think he's got big performances in him, Lam Suet. When we saw him in that, was it Time, that film with Nick Chung's dad, Nick Say's dad, Patrick Say, and Lam Suet was in it, wasn't he? And he kept seeing the woman at the massage parlor. Have you seen Time?
I don't think so. It sounds familiar, but I don't think I've seen it.
And it's got Fung Bo in it too, hasn't it? And yeah, that's a little recommendation from us. We saw it on Netflix, and but Lam Suet's got a beefy role in that. He has to do some acting, doesn't he? And it's like surprising what he can do when materials in his hands. Yeah, go Lam Suet. No, I'm turning into the big Lam Suet fan.
We should all be big fans of Lam Suet, right? I mean, just the cast in this movie in general is just so good. It's so good. And the guy who plays the older, like wise kind of leader guy of the triad group, like the big fat guy, for lack of a better way to describe him.
Uncle Tang.
Uncle Tang?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Wong Jing's father, isn't it?
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well, I had no idea.
What's his name, Shaz? Look it up. It's it's Wong Jing's dad.
And he's got that little dog, the pug, that he walks around everywhere.
He's so cool, isn't he? He turns up in so many films.
Wong Tin Lam.
Yeah, Wong Tin Lam. Yeah.
Okay.
But if you look it up, I'm 99.9% sure it's Wong Jing's dad.
Wow. I had no idea. I love like his calm demeanor, and like everything is like, going to chaos around him. And when they take his belt or his suspenders in the police station, remember that part? And he's just like holding up his pants like Santa Claus, like, well. I just love he's so nonchalant, but you can tell that he's serious about not wanting everything to turn to chaos, but he just has this calmness to him that's so good.
Yes, he does. And it's nice having that mix in the cast of like old school, new school. So your favorite Shaw actors in there? Yeah. We got David Chang.
Yeah, the cop. He plays the cop, right? Yeah. And I was like, I knew that was. I'm so bad. When I was rewatching it last week, I was like, "Is that Derek Yee?" And I was like, and then I looked it up, and I was like, "No, it's another one of the Shaw Brothers guys." But I almost got it. But I was, because I guess the last time I watched this movie, I just didn't recognize him for whatever reason. But when I saw him, I got really excited this time around. Yeah.
It was easy to mix him up with his brother, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
But who was the other one? I can't remember the other.
Was it Wang Chung?
Wang Chung.
We didn't know he was in it until at the end, so I didn't recognize him.
Yeah, I can't remember. He's the one that has the accident, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
What
yeah. I didn't recognize him at all, but now that you mention it, I see his face and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Whistle, that was it.
Yeah.
And then you think back to the Shaw days.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how different did he look in this?
Yeah.
And I just wouldn't have believed it was the same guy until, you looked it up and you're like, oh my God, that's Wang Chung. I'm like, no. Yeah. So that's beautiful.
Yeah,
that is
really good.
His career still continued at that point. Because I had no idea. I didn't know he was still in films.
No, I didn't.
I thought, how many times I watched
I had no idea either. Yeah. And now I'm wondering like how many people from the what, if you want to call it the old days, are in these movies, and I just don't recognize them anymore. And it's
this has become one of Shaz's habits after we watch a film. She goes straight onto HKMDB, looks down it, and goes, oh, did you know so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so's in this? I'm like, no, really? Which one were they?
Exactly. I know. And then they're like, wait, what? Like I won't go too much into the second one because obviously we're going to do a different episode about that. But when I was watching the credits for the second one, I saw Andy On is in it. And I was like, what? Who did he play?
Which one? Right.
And now I have no idea. I Googled it. I Googled Andy On Election 2, and I couldn't find any pictures of the character he played. And I'm like, well, I don't want to rewatch the whole movie to try to see him. But I'm like, I had no idea he was in that movie.
That's crazy. I mean, I nearly always miss Andy. I don't know why. It's like a face I just find hard to commit to memory. And then he'll turn up, and then you halfway through the film, and you're like, oh shit, that's Andy On.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
And, like right on, like oh, of course it's him. Like but he's a fun one, isn't he?
Is he American, Andy On?
He is, isn't he?
He is, right? He was like I seem to remember reading that he was like a bartender when he was young, and he was working at a bar or something like that. And this might be the wrong story, but I for some reason I connect this to him. He was basically like, screw this, I want to be a movie star. And he went to Hong Kong and he became a movie star.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's a great story, isn't it? I mean, if you just got the balls to do it, and a little bit of fire inside you, then I guess everything's achievable. Yeah.
And the physical ability to beat the crap out of people.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of his appeal. He's a big dude who can do martial arts. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks pretty sturdy, doesn't he? And he's had some on-screen fights, hasn't he? Like you say, Jackie Chan, Scott Atkins, he's fought against a lot of them. So
Donnie Yen kicked him in the head in Special ID.
Oh yes, yeah.
I'd
like to take that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be kicked. I don't know if he actually kicked him in the head, but it looks like he kicked him in the head. Yeah.
You just never know, do you? Because you see some of the outtakes or the shots, and you take it for granted, and you're like, yeah, Century Rothrock did knock out that guy in Millionaires Express. Like, oh, right, okay.
Yeah, like who was it? Sammo Hung knocked out Elvis. Was it Elvis Choi or Ridley Choi in Skinny Tiger, Fatty Dragon?
Oh, right, okay. Ridley Choi was in that.
Yeah, at the end, kicks him in the head, and he hits the wall, and then hits the staircase or something like that. And he actually knocked him out.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine Sammo Hung just full on kicking you in the head? It's terrifying.
No, I think I'd probably start crying before he even lifted his leg. Have mercy.
Please don't kill me. Yeah, well, it's like who is John? You know John Kreng, who was like a stuntman in some movie. Yeah. So he told the story on I think on The Master, the 88 films release, that there's like a scene in that movie where Jet Li does like a spinning jumping kick, and on one of the takes Jet Li like missed his mark or something, and he actually kicked him full on in the head. And he said that he couldn't feel like the left side of his body for like the rest of the day, and he thought he was going to die.
Jesus.
Can you imagine?
I knew there was a reason I didn't go over there and try.
What did you do today? Oh, nothing. I just got kicked in the face by Jet Li.
God, I mean, there's a little bit of bragging rights in it if you can still manage to speak afterwards.
If you survive, yeah, exactly. That's the thing where I'm like, on the one hand, no, thank you, but on the other hand, that for the rest of your life, you could be like, oh, did I tell you about the time that Jet Li kicked me in the head? Yeah,
I think he's injured Donnie Yen a couple of times, hasn't he?
Has he really? That's interesting.
Yeah, once with a staff in Once Upon a Time in China 2. I think he cracked him with that. And then the other one was in Hero, and he nicked him with the sword just above the eye. He needed stitches.
Wow.
So that was lucky, wasn't it? You don't want to get any closer than that.
I wonder if have you guys heard any of the stories about early in his career, Donnie Yen was kind of hard to get along with?
Yeah.
I wonder if Jet Li was a little bit angry with him.
Well, he did. I guess he throws the baton out, doesn't he, to whoever he's working with, because he's that kind of tempestuous, fiery character.
Yeah.
And I guess I like that because it always makes me laugh. But some people, it will rub up the wrong way, for sure. And it depends where you sit on the fence with that, doesn't it? Because I enjoy it, but I can imagine if you're working with it, it's not going to be as enjoyable.
Yeah, he's an interesting character because so when I was in grad school, we had some students from China in my class. Since I went to film school for grad school, and some of the production students were from China, and one of them had worked on like some sets of some Chinese productions. And we were talking about Jackie Chan and like Jet Li and Donnie Yen and stuff like that. And he was saying that like early in his career, Donnie Yen had like some personality problems that were like famous in the industry. But then at some point he like apologized to people and like changed the way that he behaves on set and like made amends to people and stuff like that. And then after that was very easy to get along with. So it's just, I mean, obviously I wasn't there. I have no idea what actually happened, but I like hearing like the stories like that, behind the scenes. Yeah.
I do know he had a big falling out with Vincent Zhao, didn't he? Or Vincent Zhao, Fu Manchu, because he was supposed to have been in not Flashpoint, Special ID. Yeah, he was supposed to have been Special ID, but they had a bit of a bust up, didn't they? And words were said, and then Vincent Zhao left the production, and that was it. We didn't get to see Donnie versus Vincent, which would have been lovely, but never mind.
Well, maybe that helped Andy Owen's career, right? Because he was was being special
Yeah,
ID.
maybe it's that,
Yeah.
maybe it's
Speaking of
that
Andy
role.
Owen, yeah,
That was a great fight, wasn't it? To be fair, I mean, I love that fight in
I
that film. Not
I
quite as
like
much
that movie.
Flashpoint, but not far behind. Yeah.
That scene in the is it a restaurant where Donnie Yen's in a restaurant and all those
Yes.
people rush in, he's just like beating the crap out of them.
I think that's what I like is when you get that kind of meld. And I guess that's what I thought with Nick Chung in Election. He had that kind of fire where you thought he can take him. You know, I don't care how many there is. He's going to do it. He's badass.
That sort of driven.
And I think I like it more when it's
Yeah.
somebody that you don't connect with martial arts necessarily as much. Like Nick Chung, I don't think martial artist, I think actor. It just, I don't know, it gives a bit more gravity to it. And for me personally, I think it feels a bit more real, you know, and a bit more dangerous because you don't know the extent of what they can do. Whereas if I see Donnie in a big action scene, I expect him to kick ass and come out of it winner every time. But if it's like Nick Chung, I know he's a badass, but I'm like thinking, is he going to get killed off in this scene? Or is it, you know, which way is it going to go? And that tension, that underlying tension, just, yeah, I don't think you can beat a bit of tension in a film.
And I think I think you used a great word there of it's unpredictable, I think you said. To me, that's kind of like the heart of this movie in a way. Cause like we said with Simon Yam, you don't know who he really is. You don't know which way he's gonna go. We don't at the beginning know which way they're gonna vote in the election. You don't know what's gonna happen to Nick Chung in that scene. The Louis Koo character too is kind of he's a little enigmatic. She's like, well, he's in a business class. He seems like he's like the straight one, like the upstanding citizen one, and then we know what happens in the second movie. We could talk about that a different time, but yeah, it's just, you never really know who these people are and what they're capable of because of the silence of the movie until the action scenes come or when they have to make like really important decisions. And that makes it unpredictable.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I like as well. I know it's category 3, and it's not what everybody usually would think of as category 3, but I do believe that it's because they show some of the actual triad rituals in Election. I think that's what it is.
Oh yeah, and you can't show those, right, in like a category 2 movie. Yeah, I think I heard about that at some point. Yeah.
Which I kind of like because then it feels more authentic. You're like, oh, is this what it's like? I know when I'll save that for the second episode because I don't want to go into that now. But yeah, there was a way I felt when I was watching that in the cinema. But I will go into that later. Another day.
Well, we can end this episode here if you guys want, and then allow people to anticipate what comes next. Or do you want to talk any more about the movie?
Do you have any final words, Shaz?
No, I don't think so.
No, did we cover everybody? I think the wife's role probably more important than the second one, isn't it? Yeah. So we're good. If you're good, Will.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining me. This has been great. Thanks everyone for watching.
Yes, thank you everyone.
I guess
thank you to Big Brother Will for having us.
Thank you for coming, and I guess we'll see you next time for the second episode.
Okay, we will see you then.
All right. This is my sailor. Goodbye.